start?
I'm happy to start. Have you? Where are we with core receipt?
No, we're not core it yet, Chair.
Okay. Well, we're not at the point where where it's essential that we get to the core bits. Could you just keep me posted as we go through? Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining. We haven't met since January, so apologies. Our meeting happened to coincide with the early start of lockdown. Could people turn their microphones off? I'm getting feedback through the system. That's better, thank you. So apologies that we haven't met since. We've got a reasonably brief agenda, but the main part of the agenda being on the annual report and accounts. So without any further ado, let me move on. To the best of my knowledge, we have no apologies for absence, and we'll just have to keep track if people arrive a bit late. Okay, Tanya? Do we have any declarations of interest that anybody wished to alert us to based on the agenda? I haven't a yell, so I'll assume that's a no. The minutes of the last meeting, 13th of January meeting, were sent round in the paper pack. I've heard nothing in terms of response. I've been through them soon after they came out. Can I just check if everybody's happy for me to effectively sign those off?
Yeah, I'm okay with that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, unless I hear otherwise, then I will take those as approved and sign those off. I've got limited remarks. What I will raise will come up during the meeting. So, if I may, I will move on to matters arising. Tim, we've got whistleblowing as one of your subjects. Is there anything you wish to raise?
Thank you, Chair. Just to report that I had one approach from somebody asking how to make a whistleblowing complaint. I referred it to internal audit, but neither of us have heard anything further on that, and that's been about a month or so. So I think that's written off now unless it comes back. Nothing else to report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, then moving on to the forward plan. Does anybody wish to raise anything? I suspect as we go through the meeting, we may have other topics that turn up, but I'm reasonably happy with what we've got at the moment. Does anybody? Hello.
Just one issue, just to understand on the minutes. In the matters arising on 203, the last line was saying that you will get the briefing by April. Rest on the number issues.
Sorry, which point was that, Ram?
203 internal audit update. That was
yes.
And then the last line was saying the chair requested that the short briefing note be circulated to members to confirm. I'm just thinking on that issue. Is it done somewhere? I can't remember.
I believe we've actually got that in our annual report. The reports that are good heavy ambers are covered in the internal audit papers.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Anything on the forward plan? Okay, I will take that as approved, and no doubt we will add subjects as we go through. So moving on to the equal pay and equal pay audit and the gender equalities. Anna, do you wish to have 5 minutes talk to the paper?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I had attended the September session, and we had committed to come back and update you on this year's gender pay gap statistics and our workforce diversity statistics. So we are legally required to report our pay gap since 2018. And last year, in 2019, our gender pay gap had significantly gone up compared to 2018. We did some analysis, and we believe this happened because more males were appointed in senior level positions and more females in lower salary level positions. We took measures, and as was also outlined in the September report, and there has been progress in the past year in terms of lowering the gender pay gap to levels below the national average. So this has been the lowest pay gap figure since we first started reporting in 2018, and it stands at 8.5%. So we will continue to monitor our pay gap and our workforce statistics, and we aim to lower the gap further in the future. We have also seen progress in our workforce statistics, and this is progress that we've seen year on year, so it's not just a 1 year progress. So at the moment, 49.5% of our employees are female, and so we haven't been more representative gender-wise before. The representation of women at the 2 highest salary level points is lower, but it's still going up. It's still higher than previous years. There has also been an increase in the overall representation of ethnic minority employees in the organization. And we've also had an increase in people who are declaring a disability in the organization. The majority of our employees have got hidden disabilities. And finally, there has been a continued increase in the numbers of younger people in the organization under the age of 25. And we feel that that has a lot, that the Building Our Future Workforce program has got a lot to do with this as well. Equality update-wise, very briefly, we are currently working towards attaining disability leaders recognition. Again, our Building Our Future Workforce strategy, we're continuing to deliver this. We're hoping to provide underrepresented groups with further opportunities in terms of skills and work experience and work opportunities. We also finalized our accreditation with the Living Wage Foundation, and we're living wage employers. And very recently, we attained Thrive at Work accreditation, which aims at improving health and well-being for employees, including mental health and well-being. In response to Black Lives Matter and in line with our wider inclusion objectives, we carried out a number of different equality focus groups very recently, and we feel that this will help us shape our future internal equality and inclusion agenda, and we're currently considering a number of different diversity and inclusion activities around that agenda. So finally, in response to COVID, our recovery work is being developed with a constant view on those who are most disproportionately impacted by COVID, and we are conducting equality impact assessments to that effect as well. So that's it from me. I think I could hear my voice in the background, and I'm not quite sure if you could as well, or if it was clear. If you've got any questions, comments, suggestions.
Thank you. Alex has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, that's the child's toys grabbed it in the background. I'll get them to take it away very quickly. Oh, can you grab that, please, quickly? Right, my question, once that toy has been removed, is we do love a good dashboard on the audit committee. And it'd be really useful to go and get a dashboard across all these equality indicators, because at the moment, Anna, your presentation was really helpful, but it was just like this year over last year. So I'd like to see if there's a sustained trend in any of these indicators, because I know quite a few of these surveys have been going around for a few years. It'd be really useful to go and have a good dashboard so we can pick up any longer term trends. And also, one index I think would also be useful to go and include, maybe not to be overwhelmed by indexes, is the Stonewall Equality Index as well. So it'd be worth putting in. But it'd be really useful to go and have that, because it's great to see progress over a year. But just as a committee, it'd be probably useful to get a good, sustained picture. That can be done in a nice dashboard or something, because we all love a dashboard. That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Anybody got another one that they want to raise? Anna, Alex picked up on the point I wanted to raise, which was, although he's put it much more succinctly, it was to make sure that what we aren't seeing here is like a type of a one-off improvement, and being able to monitor the trends on a regular basis would be really helpful. So if it is possible to pick up on Alex's suggestion, and we just receive that as an annual update, that would be really helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'll take that on board, and I'll go back and see what we can do around that. Absolutely.
Thank you, Anna. Does anybody else want to add anything, or can I take this paper as having been accepted? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
And you, Anna, thank you very much. I've just been notified about 5 minutes ago, discreetly or not discreetly by Tanya, that we are in fact quorate, so thank you for that. Let's move on to the internal audit annual report. Peter or Sandra, do you wish to talk through the key points?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll pick up the annual report. Members of the committee are probably aware that as your internal auditors, at the start of the year, we come up with an internal audit plan, all the reviews that we plan to undertake during the year. Then throughout the year, we complete those reviews and issue individual reports, bringing any key issues to the attention of ARAC, and also copies of reports where appropriate, generally where there's 4 amber recommendations that have been agreed. The overall purpose of your internal audit is that at the end of the year, as the head of audit, I'm able to give an opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the combined authorities' internal control, governance and risk management framework. And on page 17 of the pack, if you've got it up in front of you, in a sort of orangey box, that's where the internal audit opinion for 2019-20 is. And that says that based on the work that we've completed during the year, we are able to provide reasonable assurance that the CA does have adequate and effective internal control, risk management and governance in operation. So it's an unqualified opinion and it's a good report. Now, throughout the rest of the report, we give you some background as how we've arrived at that opinion. And as you're probably aware, each review that we do, we make red, amber or green recommendations, and we give an overall level of assurance for each review. Limited, which is really poor, satisfactory, which is good, but we have found issues where we think there could be some improvements, and substantial, which is, this area is working well, although there may be 1 or 2 tweaks that could be possibly put in place to improve controls. On page 18, we show a box there that demonstrates that during the year we issued 9 substantial levels of assurance, 4 satisfactory and no limited. So again, a good report by virtue of the fact that there were no limited assurance reports during the year. We then go into slightly further detail, starting on page, I believe, 19 of your pack, where we list each review that we've completed. We identify the number of red, amber or green recommendations and the number that have been accepted by the CA, because that's obviously important, and then again the level of assurance for each review. And as you will see, particularly if you look at the red column, during the year we made no red recommendations on any of our reviews. We've kept the committee up to date with the work that we've completed throughout the year, but since we last met, we did complete 2 audits, one on West Midlands Rail, one on programme and project management, and another one on ATG, which is a private item at the end of the committee meeting, so I won't go into detail on that one at the moment. But on the other 2, as you'll see, we made 3 amber recommendations on each, so we have appended those full reports to this annual report, so the committee get the opportunity to have sight of those. Working my way through the report, we do flag that a number of audits that were in the original plan have either been deferred to 2021 or 21-22 for a variety of reasons that I can either touch upon now, or maybe when we later on in the agenda when we're looking at the revised internal audit plan. None of those particularly impacted upon our ability to give an overall opinion. We did complete all the key financial systems work and again found that those were operating well. We also have a programme of following up recommendations made in previous years, and the table updating you on that is on, I believe, page 21 of the pack. And I know this time last year we reported that we were a bit disappointed that there'd been a lack of action on following up on implementing some of those previous recommendations. And this year, while there is still work to do, I think we were a lot more comfortable that the CA were taking those actions where appropriate, and we have a fairly rigorous regime following those up. Because at the start of the report we only give you a tabular format behind some of the details of our reviews, we do provide a little bit of narrative on each one to give you a bit of a feel for some of the issues that we came across and what those areas relate to. And as I mentioned earlier, we did append the last 2 reports in full that we've issued. So overall, a positive report, a clean bill of health that Tim and the CA can then feed into its annual governance statement, which then itself goes within the statement of accounts and is later on the agenda. Hopefully that just demonstrates how the work of internal audit flows through to the statement of accounts. happy for myself or Sandra to try and answer any questions you may have on that report. Thank you.
Ram, I think you've got a question.
Yes, yeah, I think it's on page 23. There's a mention of homeless task force. I'm just trying to understand the impact or how effective it is in relation to the rough sleeping at the moment. Because of pandemic issue, everybody was supposed to be covered by and there should be no rough sleeping outside. I'm trying to figure out how did it impact our homeless task force.
Yeah, we'll do.
Was it doing anything at all, or is just expecting other authorities, our constituent authorities, to do that work, or anything done by yourself?
Yeah. Thanks for that. Unfortunately, we did our review on homelessness and the task force before the pandemic, so I'm not sure of the impacts of that. I don't know if there's anybody on the call from the CA who may be able to update Alec on that.
It may be helpful, Chair, if somebody can send the note afterwards if it's not there available now.
I think, Peter, Ram raised an interesting point. I think, bearing in mind it's such a critical subject, especially in this period, I think it would be useful if you could just confirm some of the findings from that report post-COVID, or at least at this point in COVID, and just send an email round. It would be a curious acceptance of the homeless task force pre-COVID, when we know that if anything was likely to have affected it, would have been Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay, Peter, can I leave that with you? I'd like to, before the next meeting, I'd like you to have circulated a note round to all of our, just giving an update on your opinion based on what the situation is now. Thank you. Alex, you still have your hand raised. Was that some of your original questions?
No, new question.
By the way,
a new question. Also, before my new question, just pick up on Ram's point. There is a meeting of the Homelessness Task Force this Thursday, so there'll be an update after that. So, Ram, you may get some answers to your questions quite soon. So, exquisite timing there. My question was actually, if we look at pages 40 to 42. It's regarding the project management framework. I mean, I'm surprised this is, maybe I'm missing something here. I'm surprised this is just picked up as amber. It's saying, you know, we're yet to have a organizational wide framework. It says that practices are not fully consistent. It's not being communicated. There's no dedicated program of training or induction. And, you know, also notes we're not sort of fully complying, fully following national leads on this. So given the big deliveries we have on many of our projects, I'm just surprised that this is amber rather than red. You know, I think that not having a formal project management framework would be pretty crucial, but I may be missing something, so I'm happy to have mine put at rest.
Peter, could you respond first? And we do actually have the newly appointed Fiona Bevington, head of the Strategic Hub, here. Fiona may wish to make a comment in a moment, but Peter, can you give your thoughts on Alex's point, please?
Sure. Obviously, Alex, with those issues that you raise on their own, you know, they are quite significant. It's the fact that against the backdrop of all of the various projects and programs that are underway and the controls that are in place through a wide range of areas, we felt that those issues, it was borderline between being red or amber, but at this particular stage, because we were aware that the CA had committed to a number of recommendations, that we felt that we would err on the amber side at this stage. Obviously, if we then follow up those recommendations and they aren't implemented within the agreed timescales, that may then sort of increase the severity of those issues. But it is a good point you raised. But like I say, I think on the balance of what we'd found and the overall feel for that review when we were out on site doing the work, that amber would be a fair reflection.
Fiona, do you wish to say anything, albeit that you're newly appointed and therefore probably relatively new to the situation?
Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you, Chair. The majority of actions do have a target date of March 2021. and they will be implemented as part of the Single Assurance Framework implementation, which will be starting in August this year. So whilst I believe that they are realistic, it's a realistic target, I'm also quite confident that the majority of those actions will be achieved in a short period of time. They will be implemented, however, they will not be fully embedded across the combined authority. So I wouldn't want to overpromise, but I do believe that the majority of actions will be achieved. There is one action with a date of September 2021, and that's in reference to the strategic planning pipeline. And whilst there is a lot of pull from the organisation for change and to try and achieve that earlier, again, I am cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to bring some of that forward. If it would give confidence to ARUC, I would be happy to attend a future meeting, perhaps early 2021, to provide an update where we are regarding the Single Assurance Framework and meeting all of the actions within the recommendations.
That would be very welcome, Fiona. Alex, does that give you some comfort, or do you still have a concern?
Some comfort, though I think if any one of those projects does slip up between now and March of next year, the question will be asked, maybe why this wasn't looked at a bit sharper and why the risks weren't given more emphasis. I appreciate Peter's comments, very candid comments about it being balanced between red and amber. Just reading it myself, it does feel you don't have this framework in place now, albeit I understand what Fiona is saying going forward. That would be, I'd put a risk of red now and then hope to go and upgrade that later, just to go and focus minds a bit.
Okay, Alex. Fiona, I think I'd like to see you back at ARAC for the January ARAC meeting. And I think, Peter, if we aren't making progress looking like hitting the March 21 deadline, and sometime that the September 21 is coming forward, so we don't have confidence at that particular point, then I think we will be inviting you to reconsider whether amber was in fact the right mark.
Sure.
I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, thanks, David. We will do. And Fiona will probably work closely with you maybe towards the end of the summer, early autumn, just to get a feel for what your approach and plans will be, so that we can take those into account and work together through those.
Of course, we'd welcome that. We do have an implementation plan for the Single Assurance Framework, so we'd be happy to share that with you, Peter, and work through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex, I think you put your hand up again.
It's down again. It's my very old PC being a bit fiddly. It should be down now.
All right. So, Fiona, Peter, I think that we would count this one as being on notice of being marginal, red, amber. We're prepared to accept that it's amber at the moment, but if we aren't making the type of progress in January when we see it again, then I think we will be looking for this to be raised up everybody's priority list by moving it into a red position. Is that for everybody? Peter?
Agreed, Chair. Agreed.
Thank you very much. Can I go to the West Midlands rail one audit and to see if there are any questions anybody's got on that one? Has anybody got anything they wish to raise? If not, then I'd like to throw open the floor to you, Tim. There's an awful lot on here around governance issues and appropriate people being in the right, being able to handle their responsibilities properly. Could you comment on a lot of the deadlines which are now passed? You're down as having deadlines of the 30th of June on pretty well everything in the internal audit report. Could you just talk us through whether you hit those deadlines?
Thanks, Chair. So obviously we have had some slippage with regard to some of those deadlines because of the unexpected events, the first part of this year with regard to COVID. So some of those have been met. I'm working with the internal audit to make sure that we do have a programme to deal with some of those things. And I think we'll have to report back probably at a future meeting. Unfortunately, we have had to reprioritise our resources in terms of the response, the emergency response with regard to COVID, and a lot of the senior resources in the organisation, myself included, have really had to be poured into that sort of emergency response, which I'm sure you can appreciate. But that's not to say that these will be forgotten about or missed. So we will be working through them. Things are getting back a little bit more on even keel now. So and we have got some other resources in the organisation who are working on some of these. So I think that's really the sort of the update from me at this stage.
Could I ask
question?
Thank you, Tim. Could I ask that either option, which is either that the internal audit report is amended to demonstrate that the timings of the 30th of June, because of COVID, were unrealistic and that there's a new deadline, so that the official report that they'd be likely to calendar is tabled to us with a new deadline on it, or that you agree to come back to the September meeting acknowledging that these are overdue and that all of the actions that were down at the 30th of June will have to be sorted out by the September meeting. Which of those two do you prefer?
I think probably the first one, Chair, but I think I probably need to work with Peter and Sandra to work through those, just to be able to give you an update before September. Then perhaps we can decide what we need to report in September, if that's okay.
Okay, Peter, the action is on you then to work with Tim to resubmit this paper for the record with the amended deadlines, and just note that these were amended instructions of our Act because of COVID, and that there's a new deadline. We'll circulate that round and make sure that it's also in the minutes of an updated report. Could you just let me know what those dates are to make sure that I feel reasonably happy, and we can then update it in the minutes of the September meeting? Is that all right, Peter?
Yep, we can do that. No
Tim, are you
problem.
okay with that?
Yes, Chair.
Alan Taylor. Alan, you had a question. Forgive me, I missed your hand earlier.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's first of all, sorry, I was a few minutes late getting there and I missed the declarations. I'd like to put in my usual Transport Development Committee member because it affects this anyway. No, I was just going to ask about the June completion date, but now we've had the answer from Tim. Thank you very much, David.
Okay, and I'm sorry I missed you earlier.
Okay, fine.
I could ask you to shake your hands a lot more vigorously, but I don't always notice it. I've just seen another hand raised. Let me just quickly check who that was. Oh, that was you, Alan, I think, again. Any other hands up? No. So can we take it then that those two reports are accepted, and other than the changes that we've asked for the West Midlands, we can accept that they're in our formal record and nothing more needs to be done? I have no questions or comments on that. One that comes up, which I do want to raise, Peter, in the external audit report, there's reference to the fact that 5G, the internal audit was presented at this meeting on 5G, and of course 5G hasn't come to this meeting. Can you explain where we are on 5G?
Yeah, on that one, David, can I just stand over to Sandra to give a quick update?
Thank you.
Sandra?
Yeah, I think we updated external audit that it was in progress and we're hoping to get a draft to this meeting. That hasn't happened, but as we've said in the annual report, based on what we've already fed back to Ian Martin, there are no major issues. So hopefully the report will come to the next direct meeting. It will be issued way before then.
Tim, do you have a view as to why that is running behind?
Chair, I think unfortunately it's just been again a victim of the pressure of time and colleagues in Wolverhampton having to cover quite a lot of stuff with regard to COVID as well. So apologies for that, but hopefully we will get back on track with this and we can certainly update the September meeting.
Peter, before I turn to you, Ram's raised his hand. Can I just see what Ram wishes to raise, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was original. My thinking was that because of the political uncertainty between the new conflict between Britain and China, the issue of 5G is also a little bit impacted because there's a lot of discussion going on. I'm just concerned how this company is going to be impacted, because if we have a contract, where it's going to be, what is the position? That's why I wanted some kind of understanding. Are we just in limbo waiting for the government instructions, or have we got a contract which can carry on with the job we are supposed to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. Julia, would you like to just comment on that? I suspect that slightly more global political scenario falls into your bailiwick.
Sorry, do you mind just repeating the question?
Ram was raising the point around 5G and the issues with highway,
Yes.
and whether or not there is an issue that we may well find ourselves with 5G because of that.
Yes, so Ian Martin is leading on that. We're just trying to work through the implications of that, but I'm more than happy to work with Ian to give a written update on what we think the impact on our position is.
Presumably, we're still waiting for the government to be clear. It has
exactly
not yet been clear. So if members don't mind, I think what I'd like to do is to see what type of announcement we get from the government in the next few weeks, and then ask Ian and Julia just to alert me, and we can then circulate a note on what that's going to do. It may be that has to be taken into account in the work that Peter has already done, but let's just wait and see. I think there are two parallel bits there. Understanding whether the government's position changes and causes a problem, and secondly, what was the internal audit up until this point? And that looks like that will be due in the September meeting. Is that right? Peter, you had a question.
It wasn't a question, David. It was really just building on what Tim mentioned with regards to the impact of COVID on the internal audit team at Wolverhampton. The team, bar Sandra, were redeployed on a food distribution hub and on small business grants support. So it did impact upon the resources that we had available for March, April and May, and obviously onwards. We are seeing a slight return to normal, but the CA have been sort of very supportive of us through this time, and we're hoping to hit the ground running again as soon as we can return to any sort of sense of normality.
Okay, can I log a point here? And I suspect it's for you, Tim. I think whoever chairs ARA, myself, but whoever follows me, probably ought to be consulted when changes like that occur, so that they can be held accountable to the rest of the committee if there are significant changes to the timetabling of our internal audit reports for whatever reason. Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, I mean, I think that's a very fair comment, and we'll bear that in mind.
Can we just have a quick update, Peter, Tim, on what we are like with our internal audit plan for 1920? What slipped? What is now moved into 2021?
Yeah.
I'm expecting Peter to comment on that, but I think it's on.
Yes. Can you hear me again now? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I think on pages 20 and 21 of the pack, we list the areas that have been deferred to 2021 or further. That includes the local industrial strategy, the adult education budget, where on that one we're actually awaiting the outcome of an external review, housing and regeneration programmes, commissioning and funding, and risk management. But we go into more detail later on the agenda today with regards to those reviews and where they now sit in the 2021 or onwards audit plans. So there was an impact, but it wasn't as significant as it possibly could have been.
Okay, I give notice that when we get to that particular topic on the agenda, the question will be whether we have enough resource. So you have to think about that one. Does anybody else wish to raise any questions? Let me just check if I've got any hands up. That I can't say I haven't. Sean, you normally pop in on this particular topic. Is there anything you wish to raise?
Sorry, Chair. No, I'm happy at the moment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Then moving on, I think we've done the internal audit report, Peter. So I'd like to move to the annual accounts, and I am so grateful that everybody's turned up so that we can actually do this, do the job properly. What I propose to do is to invite external audit to give their opinion and to have their first say, because there's little point in us going through our comments on the annual reports and accounts and being invited to approve them and the AGS until we've heard from external audit. So I'm just going to reverse the order. ask Grant to have his say first. Grant, are you okay to go?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm going to take you through, I think it's in the pack, it's onto page 159 on the written ones. I think it's slightly out on the PDFs. I think it's 163 on the PDF version. So that's the page that says headlines of our report. So what I propose to do is briefly walk you through the findings reports. I should be joined today. I think Helen Lillington should be on the line, but I think her internet's been having a few problems. So hopefully Helen will be there if questions. If not, I might have to take some away. So if I take you to, say, page 159 in your written or the paper pack, just in terms of headlines, as you alluded to earlier, we haven't met since January, or the ARAC hasn't met since January. We have issued one change to our audit plan that was presented to you back then. And you're probably not surprised to find that is in relation to COVID-19. And what we did identify is what we would call a financial statements level risk. And that was primarily, I think, in terms of the combined authority, along with a lot of other authorities moving to remote working, and therefore the potential impact upon governance and the ability to produce the accounts in that timeline whilst working remotely. So as a firm, we actually have put this risk into all of our clients. So you're not alone in that. It's not a specific combined authority risk. It's a response to COVID-19. So that's the main change or to our audit plan that was presented to you in January. We were considering that as a significant risk at the financial statements level. In terms of where we are on the audit, David, as you were alluding to, the accounts actually were produced on the 18th of May, which was actually in line with your original timetable. The government had actually released and opened up the window for preparation. You had actually until the end of August to produce your accounts, and then we had the end of November to complete our work, and that's in response to COVID-19. So the authority has done really well in publishing the accounts on the 18th. Your inspection period therefore opened on the 19th, and it's as it's now closed. And I can just confirm that we've not had any questions or objections coming on this level of the accounts. And as such, we've tried to keep our audit broadly in line with the agreed timelines. Across our thing, we are seeing that working remotely is proving more challenging. I think for us as external auditors, we are getting there, but audits are taking longer. Therefore, in terms of this report today, I think it's where we are effectively the audit in mid-July. And as we do allude to earlier, our overall proposal is we'll take you through where we are today, but we do propose to bring back a finalised audit findings report in September. So where are we on the audit? Overall, from the work we've considered to date, I think we are proposing to look at an unqualified opinion on the financial statements. As we've highlighted there, in respect of adjustments to the accounts that are in front of you today, there's a net adjustment of around about 2.3 million. That's actually made up of 3 adjustments in respect of late information from Birmingham City Council in respect to, I think, creditor in relation to Athletes Village. There's an overaccrual in respect of investment programme, and you knew this was a risk when you published your accounts early. There was an updated IS 19 report from your actuary that then resulted into the net pension liability being amended. So they're actually outlined in Appendix A in terms of those adjustments. We've had a look at those adjustments. We're comfortable with them in terms of the overall. I think we're just doing some finalisation in terms of what we're looking at just on the original, on the information to prove its authenticity, but that's just an audit approach for us. So it is substantially complete in terms of that. Therefore, we are at this point proposing an unqualified opinion in those respects. What needs to be resolved is, I'll come on to this a little bit later, is there's one technical accounting issue around the land fund, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Receipt of assurances from the pension fund auditor, which I think, as the committee is aware, is myself. I can confirm we have started the audit on the Wedgwood's pension fund, but that's not due to complete until the end of August, and hence that's why we're coming back to you primarily in September. And I'll come on to group procedures as well. If I take you on to the next page, which is page 160, in terms of value for money, I think as you've already alluded to, we have completed the majority of our work on value for money. There was one item in respect of 5G that we were waiting on the internal audit report. As we've noted, we have had that conversation with internal audit. We've noted they haven't found any significant issues, but we haven't actually seen the report yet. So subject to us seeing that report and forming a view on it, we are proposing an unqualified value for money conclusion. So if I just move quickly on to page 161, just one change in our materiality. When we put the plan to you in January, we're trying to estimate the full year impact of the other education. That's come through a little bit more than we sort of had expected or planned for. Therefore, we did increase your materiality for the group and the authority slightly up from planning by about £2 million. That just really affected the way that we conducted the audit, and overall, in terms of the audit, it hasn't really affected what we've done. It's just meant done a little bit, a change outside the numbers of items we had to test, and no changes to our actual, what we say, performance neutrality percentage related upon the quality of the account produced. So, moving on to page 162 in terms of significant findings, as I say, the new risk was COVID-19. We haven't identified any risks that we need significant to bring to your attention. But as I say, we've not been able to finalise all of our work in the areas, certainly around going concern. And you're not alone in that. A lot of authorities and councils are now working through the implications of what government announcements are in terms of funding and having to reprofile their medium-term financial strategies. And you're not alone in that. From what we've seen to date, we know that we're working through that. There aren't any significant issues at this point in time, but it is something that we do need to keep under review. And as I say, we'll report finally back to you in September. In terms of the next page of group accounts, I'll come on to a bit more of that in a bit more detail, but we've not identified any issues at this point in time. In terms of the next page of 164, in terms of management override controls and journals, we've now received the evidence on the 2 journals we wanted, so there aren't any issues that we need to bring to your attention there. And in terms of valuation of pension fund net liability, we've done all of the work from the authorities' end. As I say, what we're waiting on finally is the assurances that I, as a pension fund auditor, will provide back that the information that was provided to the actuary is consistent, and also looking at the final asset allocation or asset split, which we can't give until we've actually audited the value of assets in the pension fund at the year end. Taking you on to 165, I mentioned the group audit. We've identified, I suppose, 2 significant components, and that is Midland Metro Limited and the 5G company. In terms of the work we've done, I think we've now received both sort of draft reports from both the auditors. They're coming very recently, so we're just looking at those. They haven't identified any specific issues that we're aware of. We have reviewed BDO's work, but we're still trying to find a slot to review Cooper Parry's work. So in terms of that, we're not anticipating there to be any issues, but we just need to finalise the work in relation to the group audits. If I take you on to 166 or 170 in the PDF pack, this is the technical accounting issue. And what we've highlighted here is that in terms of what the authority is doing in relation to reclaiming land and making it, I suppose, reusable for housing, etc., is what is the accounting policy that should tell the story of that. And we're in current discussions through dialogue with Linda and the finance team. As it feels in terms of what we're looking at the moment, it feels more like, from an accounting perspective, it does feel more like inventory. And I think you just need to be careful to say inventory is much broader. I think most people don't think of stock of widgets and things like that. Inventory covers a broader area than maybe it does in terms of being property, plant and equipment, and maybe an asset under construction. So we have highlighted that, and we're in discussions. We are contacting, or we're liaising with our own technical team. We put here actually where we are actually in the audit at the moment. As I say, we think it feels more like inventory, but we have to have that final conversation. And as I say, I've just had feedback recently from our technical teams, and I do need to do a paper for Linda and her team that summarises that. And depending on how those conversations go, we'll report back in September. But what we're highlighting here is that if it does move, then the impact on the accounts will be no impact on your in terms of your revenue position in that respect, but in terms of the balance sheet, they'll be moved between assets under construction and inventory. So you will see a movement in the balance sheet in the classifications, but it won't impact the overall financial position of one authority, but there will be just in terms of the accounting. So we're looking at a technical accounting issue here to best describe the transaction. But as I say, I think we're finalising that now. We'll report back in September. In terms of other issues that we've identified, accounting estimates, as I say, in terms of the changes or the estimates that we've identified, you were, and I think we would stress that this wasn't, I think the accounting team got wrong. This was just late information back in from City Council in relation to the Athletes Village, which is processed after the draft accounts were presented and proposed to go through. So that's going to be put through the accounts. As I say, and you did determine that actually there was one when you, as part of our audit and as part of our conversations with you, there was one element around the investment programme where you felt that you've over accrued for an element in the investment programme and therefore proposing to adjust for that. As I say, net impact of those is 5 million, and then when you bring in the IS 19, it brings it down to 2.7 overall. The one thing we are looking at the moment is IFRS 16 that has been deferred. We are expecting a disclosure notice in our clients to say it's not been brought in and it's not been practicable. But again, that's one thing we are just need to finalise as part of the audit. Moving on to page 168, we haven't got. COVID-19 would normally give us concerns around year-end valuations of assets, or certainly of investment properties or office accommodation. The one building you have to revalue, Summer Lane, it's not material, but from what we've seen, we're currently from the value you've received from your valuer, we're satisfied that there's not a risk of material statement in the accounts. Therefore, we're not looking necessarily at any disclosures from your side in the required in relation to that. Moving on, page 169 really just summarises our work on the net pension liability. Again, we've almost completed that work. No significant issues to bring to your attention. We're satisfied that it's not materially misstated. And then move quickly on, I suppose, in terms of page 171, as I mentioned, on going concern. We do need to complete some work in that area around the MTFS, but we know that the authority, alongside all councils, is working through trying to understand what the government's recent announcements are and then reprofiling the MTFS. Our value for money work is primarily backwards looking as well, but we do need to look about what the impact on 2021 is in terms of going concern and relation to value for money. But I don't think there's any issues here at the moment that we anticipate we need to bring to your attention. Going forward. So I think in a way that brings the account together. So those, we are, as I say, anticipating an unqualified opinion with those adjustments going through the accounts. And we're satisfied that the other information within the annual report is consistent with our knowledge and understanding. I think one thing to bear in mind is we issue our opinion hopefully in September, so it will probably need to be kept under review, and certainly the annual government statement itself, which is in the account, does need to reflect the point at which we sign. So if anything significant does happen between now and that point in time, there may need to be adjustments made to that. And finally, so not finally, looking at value for money, as I say, we identified 3 primary risks on value for money. We've looked at the investment programme and delivery and reviewed relevant forward work, and you've got the single assurance framework coming back up on your agenda today. We haven't identified, we've satisfied there are appropriate arrangements in place during the year for that as part of our value for money work. We've mentioned 5G, as I say, and I think we need to be slightly careful around this in terms of we were looking at the way that you brought the company, into operation, or coming into operation, the way your governance around that during the year, and we're happy, with those arrangements in place, subject to review of the internal audit report. We are, aware of the conversations that are going on about with Huawei and the government, and certainly, but I don't think that would impact our VFM per se, because it's your arrangements for managing what you know, and this is a developing area, so I don't think that will impact upon my overall conclusion. But yes, it is good that you're raising those issues around how will it impact. That wouldn't necessarily, as far as I can say, impact upon your value for money arrangements, because it's clear that you're managing the process as we're going through that. And then the other VFM risk we looked at about, again, because you've taken on the adult education work stream, a significant new service area for you, and from our work review, we're satisfied that you've implemented that appropriately, and we can see that it's and certainly whilst it's made in 2021, and what we can see is in terms of helping those colleges through the COVID, he's been proactive in that as an authority as well. So again, we don't have any significant issues to bring to your attention. On page 178, that's where we just summarise the adjustments that I've talked through for members, and happy to take questions with those. And as always with most audits, on page 179, there's normally a number of misclassification disclosure changes. So we just outlined those there, and they've all been adjusted for in the accounts you've got in front of you today. In terms of the final bit in Appendix C around letter of rep, it is on your agenda today. It does need to be signed closer to the point of signing as possible. So we have put it on the agenda today. Members, if you're committee happy that, they can approve that, but we wanted to keep it again under review, and if any changes are needed come September, then we will inform you again. So I know that wasn't I've sort of with a walkthrough, but happy to take any questions on our findings report, or if Helen feels, if she's online, that I've missed something, then happy to take that forward.
Thank you, Grant. I haven't seen any hands up, so I don't think there are any questions. Can I just check? Can somebody let me know, raise their hand, if there are any questions you want to put to Grant? Okay. Grant, could I ask you just to pick up on two things? It may well be that you want to defer to Linda. On the adjustments page, where you talk about the 10 million additional accrual that had to be made because of the Athletes Village, did I hear you say in some of your narrative that this had been a timing issue, and that actually it was always due to happen, it's just that it happened earlier than expected?
I'll start, but I think it might be for Linda or Louise to come in. I think you had an accrual in there already, based upon the information that you understood at that point in time. It's just that Birmingham came back with with new information that said it was bigger. Was in simplistic terms.
Bigger as in, let me just quickly check, bigger as in totality than we were expecting, or more earlier than we were expecting?
I think it's. I might ask. I think it's earlier than you anticipated. I think the totals are within what you're expecting. I think it's just the claims come in a little bit, or coming in earlier.
Linda, Louise, could either of you comment?
Yeah, so exactly that really. I think because we've closed in accordance with the original timetable, we've probably found ourselves closing a bit quicker than some of our local authority colleagues because the deadline for those was extended. And we have closed our accounts based on the estimates that we had at the time. At I think it was 6 million accrual of that size. That's what we closed on. That's the accrual that we put in. That was the latest estimate and information we had from Birmingham at the time. Following on from us closing and issuing the accounts, Birmingham then actually gave us the actual invoice for the year to the 31st of March, and it was another £10 million greater. So we adjusted our accounts to reflect that, because clearly this is a material difference between what we were expecting as a claim versus what we actually got as a claim. This is entirely down to the timing of the claim. The totality of the claim overall won't change. It hasn't affected the totality. It's just how much they had claimed by the 31st of March was significantly more than we were expecting them to have claimed. That's why we've adjusted the. And the same really goes for the other two, I think. So the other two adjustments the other way in terms of the Coventry investment. So at year end, because of the way the investment programme works, all of the financial returns are received 1 month in arrears from our local authority colleagues. So we have to close our investment programme at 31st of March using best estimates from them at the time. Actually, what we found on the other two is we've gone with best estimates, and the other two actually subsequently 6 weeks later have told us that the claim was actually slightly lower at the 31st of March than they had anticipated. So again, we've adjusted our accrual to affect that as well.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Anybody else, any questions? I haven't seen any other hands go up. Okay, one more from me, and I think it starts with you, Grant, but it may well need to be picked up by you, Linda. On page 1171, under the concluding comments for going concern, the auditor makes reference to the funding gap around the investment programme. Now, we've been aware that there is a funding gap. Do we know whether that is something that is likely to continue and maybe not be sorted out? Because post-COVID that we won't be getting more money, or do we still have a relatively high confidence that we will be able to fill that investment gap?
I think I may have to defer to Linda, because I mean this is a conversation we've been having around, because you've clearly taken steps to manage that gap as a whole, if you know what I mean, in terms of the investment you need to get in. So we've been looking at that. Yeah, I haven't seen what's
Did you want me to come in?
Yeah, so I'm going to say to Linda, I'll have to pass over in terms of what the latest government announcement is and where that might impact upon you, but I think it was mainly for council, so I don't think you might not have that clarity yet either.
Yeah, so there are two things for me around going concern. I think going concern relatively is around actually the financial sustainability of the combined authority from an operating perspective. Clearly we are experiencing some income losses during this year, particularly around transport, in ticketing and things like departure charges, etc. There is a financial update report going to the combined authority board on the 24th of July, so that will be sent out this Thursday. In terms of where we think we are going to be financially this year. And then what we've also done is, in the light of what we know to date, we have reviewed and rebased our forward financial 5-year position. So again, that will be showing in the report that we, as reported back in February in the budget report, we are in a deficit position going forward. That's not dissimilar to any of our local authority colleagues. We have obviously actions in hand in terms of reviewing policies and processes with leaders and portfolio holders. We are also in continuing dialogue with government around a sustainable funding solution for mayoral combined authorities for our operating budget. The specific there that Grant mentions and David raises is around our investment programme. So you will be aware that we have an £8 billion investment programme. The combined authority was funding 2 billion of that investment programme. We have only at the minute secured funding enough to deliver 800 million of that. There has always been a reported £1.2 billion deficit in that, and that was due to have come from future business rates growth, retention, and also a mayoral precept and a supplementary business rate. And we've fully reported, we've discussed it at this committee before, all of the reasons why those things haven't happened so far and what we are doing to mitigate those. Clearly, we're taking all options to mitigate those. So obviously, we've just submitted a £3.3 billion ask to government in terms of the regional recovery. We are continuing to lobby government around business rates retention and a solution that will enable us to unlock that future potential revenue. And leaders, we're also undertaking a piece of work with leaders to look at that investment programme again, and to look at how do we want to manage that if and when we get new funding coming into the region, in terms of let's ensure that money gets considered against that investment programme first, before it goes on to any other investments. So that's where we are currently. There will be an update to investment board next week. There's an update going to leaders in August, and there'll be a further update to investment board on the investment programme in August as well.
Linda, I think we would appreciate a summary position regarding going concern around the investment gap situation and, if you like, your overall funding at the September meeting.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Absolutely. I don't particularly think that the investment programme itself causes any going concern issues. The going concern issue is around the actual financial sustainability of the combined authority from an operating perspective. The investment programme is a project-based programme that is delivering investment that requires one-off money or a regular source of funding. But happy to bring an update on both to September board following the actions that will be undertaken over the summer.
Thank you. I'm using going concern in two senses here. The whole purpose of the combined authority is that it has an investment programme, and of course if we are struggling with that, then there will be question marks about us, but then there's the wider issue about the financial term going concern. I think you understand the point I'm making. I think it would be helpful for members just to get an understanding. I see no other questions or arms raised. Can I just quickly check nobody else has got a question that they've raised? Then it leaves me to ask permission of ARAC on two things. There will be some paperwork and some detail that comes back in September before the ARAC meeting that needs signing off. May I have your permission to act as chair of ARAC, and if I am content to sign off that the letter of representation is okay as far as we're concerned, and any other changes that come out of final adjustments. Clearly there's something that concerns me, I will come back. But is ARAC happy for me to act as your representative in early September if I need to? Can I just see?
Yeah, happy to support that, Chair.
Thank you, Ram. Can I just see any hands raised if there's any dissent on that? Otherwise, I'll take that as approved. Okay, no hands raised. So thank you very much. Linda, you look like you had another point you wanted to say.
No, it was just before we go into Louise's presentation on the accounts, I just wanted to do a bit of an intro, that was all.
Fire away then.
Okay, so essentially the next item on the agenda, obviously we needed to understand the position from an audit perspective before we actually ask you to consider and approve the accounts as they stand as of today. All I wanted to say really was I just wanted to acknowledge the sort of excellent work done by Rachel and the finance team in terms of achieving the original deadline despite the unprecedented circumstances, as well as thanks to Grant and the audit team really for working under such a difficult situation and actually meeting the deadlines that we'd originally set. Also thanks to David, really, that actually David has undertaken a very detailed and thorough review of the accounts with us in quite a lengthy session, where we've looked at all the way through the accounts, and actually we've updated David in terms of any adjustments that we have made following that. There will have been the odd tweaking here and there, and the main ones are reflected in Grant's report in terms of where we've adjusted presentation. We do need to slightly amend the recommendations in the report because what we need is a specific approval. As well as approving the accounts, we need members to specifically approve the annual governance statement. But as we've just alluded to earlier, because of the timing of the pension fund audit, we will not actually be able to finally sign off an unqualified audit till September when the pension fund is complete. That may mean that other things change during July, August and September. We need to obviously continue to look at value for money. And we need to look at the audit of the pension fund. When we do sign off the accounts finally in September, obviously we will also then need to look to update potentially the narrative report if anything significant has changed in terms of activity that may have affected the combined authority, particularly in relation to going concern. But also we will then need to potentially amend the annual governance statement and the letter of rep, depending if anything significant has happened. I'm not expecting anything, but I'm just highlighting there that actually we will need to just keep those things at the front of our minds to amend should we need to before we come back. And that's where we're asking for sort of delegation to David really to make sure that actually he's comfortable with any minor changes we have to make by the time we get to September. Happy with the adjustments that we've had to make post year end, as Grant has also indicated, and then I'm comfortable with where we have got to on the technical adjustment that Grant has raised. I think from a narrative perspective, my view has always been in terms of the accounts telling a story. I've always felt that the work that we're doing in terms of securing land and regenerating it meant that for me it fell under an assets under construction scenario. Actually, it just means that it might move to inventory if that's the technical advice from Grant Thornton. It doesn't affect the bottom line, as we've said. What it does do is changes the asset classification in the accounts, essentially. And that was all I wanted to say, I think. Just over to Louise, really, to just run you through headline, just so you've got an overview of what is in the accounts.
Can I just check with Louise? Thank you, Linda. And by the way, congratulations to you as well, also, for getting the accounts to this stage in these circumstances. Louise, I was quietly ticking off the various topics that were in your presentation that Linda then talked through and stole your thunder on. Do you wish to still do your presentation? I'm happy if you do, but I just want to check.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to kind of demystify the accounts because they're quite long and quite complex. So I'm happy to go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, on you go then. Thank you. And by the way, although I was holding our breath, while sharing the screen, she isn't just going to keep staying on screen. I think she's hoping to get a PowerPoint presentation up in a minute. Oh, over you go then.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So effectively, what I was hoping to do this morning was just to try and help the members of ARAC discharge their responsibilities for the financial statements and to kind of demystify them if I can. We're not expecting you to be financial experts, but you are responsible for approving and issuing the authority's financial statements, and will also play a key role in ensuring accountability and value for money are demonstrated to the public. So as Grant alluded to earlier, the accounts represent the financial statements for the whole group. So this is the second financial year for which group accounts have been prepared by the Combined Authority. So we've got the accounts for the Combined Authority itself, plus Midland Metro Limited and West Midlands 5G for the first time. So the narrative report starts on page 64 and goes through to 82. Is a little bit like a director's report in company accounts, and it's intended to explain the more significant matters in the accounts and should be based on the information contained in the statement. And it needs to provide a fair, balanced and understandable analysis of the authority's performance. So clearly we've mentioned COVID throughout this morning's meeting. There's a section between pages 64 and 67 that provides more details of the impact of COVID-19 on the Combined Authority in terms of the impact on provision of services, clearly particularly transport services, the impact on the Combined Authority's workforce, its supply chain, and moving to the purely financial elements, the impact on reserves, financial performance and our overall financial position. There's also commentary around debt management and cash flow management as a result of the crisis. So there's a little bit more information there, so I won't go into it in any detail. Oh, gone back too far. So on page 74, we've got the revenue outturn for the financial year, and this table is intended to present the revenue outturn as in a more simple format than the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. This is how we report in the year, and so our expenditure is classified between transport services, Combined Authority, other services, the Mayor's Office and the investment programme. So we've got total expenditure for the year 245 million compared to a budget of 256, leading to an overall variance of 11.38 million. So on income, we've got the various elements of income, including transport levy, devolution deal grants. The big one in there is adult education budget, contributions from constituent and non-constituent members, the share of business rates growth in the region, investment income and contributions from reserves. You can see there that we've got a variation of 6.98 million, so the actual income was 249 for the year. Overall, following transfers to reserves, partly planned, which was the 3 million transfer to efficiency reserve, and partly a response to the COVID-19 crisis, we've got an overall surplus of 20,000 for the year. That's 0.02 million. In terms of capital, expenditure, excuse me, expenditure for the year was 194.7 million, which was 118 million less than the budget of 312.8. So the big ticket items for the year were Wednesbury to Brierley Hill Metro extension, 20 million, Edgbaston Metro extension, 14.55 million, and the Sprint project on Hagley Road with 4.06 million. So this slide describes where that capital expenditure was funded from. So the big two are government grants and borrowing, but we've also got contributions from the LEPs, other local authorities, other third parties, and a contribution from Gain Share Grant. So pages 77 and 78 has got further commentary about the most significant matters as we see them. We've already talked about COVID-19, but we've got some commentary there around capital financing costs, pension costs, interest rates going forward, the Commonwealth Games as a huge major project, mayoral budget and precept, the investment programme, borrowing powers, the business rates supplement, Midland Metro Limited, collective investment fund and residential investment fund, and overall general fund balances. So I wasn't intended to go into any detail, but the detail is there on pages 77 to 78. As we've mentioned earlier, the annual governance statement, pages 85 to 92, sets out the arrangements the authorities put in place to manage and mitigate the risks it faces when meeting its responsibilities, and it's intended to give the reader a clear sense of the risks facing the authority. So it's been prepared at the end of the year. As we've said earlier, that there's potentially additional commentary that we'll need to add to the annual governance statement as it's currently presented to reflect events up to the date of the signing of the audit certificate. So page 94, not intending to go into any detail on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, but it reports on how the combined authority performed during the year and whether its operations resulted in a surplus or deficit, and it's sometimes described as a film of all of the transactions in the year. So it includes everything. It includes cash payments made to employees for service and for services, as well as non-cash expenditure. The movement in reserve statement on pages 96 and 97, that represents the combined authority's net worth and shows its spending power. So the statement on pages 96 and 97 shows the movement in the year on the combined authority's reserves, and they're analysed into two key categories, which are the usable reserves and the unusable. So the usable reserves refer to those that result from the authority's activities and can be spent in the future, crucially. So that's the general fund balance, the balance of earmarked reserves, and the capital receipts reserve. The unusable reserves derived from accounting adjustments. They can't be spent, but they include things like the pensions reserve, the revaluation reserve, and the capital adjustment account. So the balance sheet on page 98 is intended to present a snapshot of the authority's financial position at a specific point in time, in this case the 31st of March. We've got it's a balance sheet of two halves, so the assets less liabilities in the top half need to balance with the reserves in the bottom half. And if you refer to page 98, you'll be able to see that the group balance is 202.5 million. So within that balance sheet, the non-current assets, so these are assets that have a life of more than 1 year. The value of those, 429 million. Current assets, which includes cash and other assets that in the normal course of business will be turned into cash, value 135.4 million. And current liabilities comprising short-term borrowing, trade creditors and amounts owed to others, total 93.6 million, and long-term liabilities 268.3. So all of those totted up equal the balance of the WMCA Group's reserves, 202.5 million. We've also got a cash flow statement on page 99, which sets out the authority's cash receipts and payments during the year, and the differences in there compared with the other statements arise from the accruals concept, which I'm sure members have come across before, where income and expenditure are recognised when the transactions occur and not when the cash is paid or received. And finally, we've got additional disclosure notes that are very important, take up about 50 pages, and set out within those final 50 pages of the accounts are the accounting policies. So that sets out the rules that we've followed to record transactions in the accounts. We've also got details of critical judgments that we've made, particularly around making estimates. And we've got details of property, plant and equipment in those notes. Further details about employee remuneration, that's one of the required disclosures, and also contingent liabilities. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. Can I see if there are any hands up for questions? I see none. What I'd like to just quickly ask members to do, if you check pages 154 and 155, you'll notice that in your pack that those two pages show highlighted areas where the land fund issue as to whether or if we have to change it from an asset under construction to an inventory, how those accounts will be affected. And that's just for information, but just so you understand the main point that the external auditors are raising of query, we've been given some extra sheets just to show us the effect. I've looked at those and I don't think there's any issue for us. So what I'd like to do is, before we do the actual accounts, I'd like to just check on the narrative report, if you like, the director's report. Has anybody got any questions on that? And then secondly, whether there are any questions on the annual governance statement, both of which I will probably need to have your permission to sign off in September when they are finalised, unless of course there's a what I call a significant change. So looking at firstly at the narrative report at the front, are there any questions or issues anybody wishes to raise? I see none. And what about the annual governance statement? Are you content that I should be able to sign that off, subject to the change, there not being anything significant changed when we have to finalise this in September?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's right to accept that way to deal with the issue. And also your earlier comment about the issue of what was it, auditors inventory stuff, which is mentioned probably on 456 or 59 of the page of the report. Yes, I think that's also right. I think go along with it. So on both counts, I think I support you.
Thank you, Ram. I'm just going to quickly check if there are any hands up. Can somebody, if anybody disagrees with the permission being asked by me to sign off the AGS and the directors, if you like, the front narrative in September when it's being finalised, can you stick your hands up now? Otherwise, I'll take this as approved. No hands that I can see. And the actual accounts, we've had a detailed explanation by Louise. These were shared in early May. I've been through it in some significant detail, and we've had the external audit assumption that there's going to be an unqualified report. Clearly, if it comes back as a qualification, then all bets are off. We have to go back and reconvene and have a discussion on it. But for the moment, I'm assuming that it will be an unqualified report and that I will have your permission to sign this off. Can I again just check for any hands of disagreement? None. So I will report to the Combined Authority Board that we have approved these subject to the final clearance of detail of numbers, the AGS wording and the other narrative during the months of August and September, and I will sign those off on behalf of ARAC, unless I think something's seriously material. Thank you very much. Moving on then, if I may, to the Strategic Risk Register. Tim, Julia, which one of you wishes to go first?
I think Tim was going to go first, if that's okay.
There you are, Tim.
That's fine. That's fine. Right, okay, so sorry, let me just get back on the screen. So there have been no significant changes in terms of the overall risk environment, in terms of the register. But obviously, what we have done is we have put some commentary into the register, which sort of deals with the response to the COVID situation, because obviously that does have a material impact on the risk environment. And what we have done there is to try and flag some of the issues that we think at this stage may be affected, and they're particularly around some of the financial assumptions. Linda obviously has commented on that earlier. Financial assumptions, and obviously it's a very fundamental change in terms of expectations as to, you know, where we were, say, in January to where we find ourselves now. So in January, we had what we thought was a programme of initiatives, policies and programmes going forward, some of which now have been changed in terms of the response to COVID, and the government's policy environment obviously now will be, everything will be seen through the lens of recovery, and we're obviously responding to that as well. So I think we've also commented there about how we've responded in terms of protecting our workforce, making sure that everyone can work from home except for 1 or 2 essential people. So we've covered all of that, and I think in the short term the organisation has responded well. But there's obviously now a longer term piece in terms of planning how we proceed from here and how we can continue to work effectively as we go forward. And I think the other thing to mention, obviously, is we've been very closely involved in the emergency response work across the West Midlands, working with our local authority colleagues through the local resilience forum arrangements, the strategic commissioning group, coordinating group, and we're actually leading the recovery coordinating group for the joint LRF area of the West Midlands and Warwickshire. So that's really just a very brief commentary. I'm very happy to try and answer any queries or questions, as will Julia, I'm sure.
Thank you, Tim. Let me just quickly check, are there any questions? I can't see any hands raised. Okay, on the assumption I see no other hand go up in a moment, I think, Tim, Julia, what would be useful is for us to get a sensible distillation in September as to what we're doing in terms of recovery. It may be that at that time it's too early and all you do is ask to defer it to the November meeting, but I think there has to be a slightly more detailed discussion as to how we find ourselves post-COVID and what we're doing about it, when we've had the opportunity to understand that. So can we tentatively put that for September, but accept that that might be deferred to November? Are you both okay with that?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, I think that's fine.
Thank you. Members, can I just check, anybody putting a hand up as dissent about that? None that I can see. Thank you very much. Let us move on to the internal audit plan for 2021. Peter, do you want to talk to that? Oh, sorry, I've jumped one. No, it should be the adoption of the revised single assurance framework. My apologies. Julia, Tim, are you covering that, or is that going to be covered by Karen? Sorry, who's covering that?
So I think Julia probably is going to introduce. I can help, and Jodie's on hand as well.
Yep, so Jodie will go through the detail. This is an update provided to ARAC. There have been a number of conversations over the course of the last year on how the work on the single assurance framework, the strategic hub and the governance review are all fitting together. So this is to give a bit of an opportunity for a deeper dive on the single assurance framework. This is being considered by CA board next week. A draft is with BAYS at the moment. So this is about ensuring our continued compliance and just ensuring that we've got consistency in terms of our approach across the organisation. And I think that's probably the appropriate point just to hand over to Jodie, who can then take you through the detail of the report.
Thanks, Julian.
Good morning, everyone. So the report you have in front of you, this follows previous reports to ARAC that have set out the key drivers for the Single Assurance Framework project. Those drivers have included previous audit actions, ensuring we're compliant with the national local growth guidelines, and responding to the internal project governance review. The previous report set out the intent and the need to develop an enhanced assurance framework. And the proposed processes regarding project initiation, project development, how that is reflected in business case development and the approvals phase. This report itself presents to you a draft single assurance framework document. That document incorporates the governance improvements that are set out in 3.4 of the report. We have been in a process for the past 2 to 3 weeks now with central government to get clearance from them. That process is led by the Citizen Local Growth Unit in BASE and MHCLG, and it also requires clearance from DFT and DFE. We've reached a point with them where we have informal clearance from them all, and that has now been progressed up to more senior management for us to get that final clearance. And we have a further meeting later this week and one again on Monday where we hope to then achieve that final clearance. As Julia was setting out, the intent is then to take this single assurance framework document to board for approval on the 24th of July. And there is also an intent to bring a further report back to board in September to cover any single assurance framework impact on thematic boards and enhanced political oversight. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I can also go over any of the outcomes or amendments that have been suggested as part of the central government's clearance process, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Jodie. Can I just check if there are any questions? I haven't seen anybody put their hands up. Nothing raised. Can I commend you? I think there's a very fine piece of work. Unless anybody sticks a hand up, what I would prefer to do with us is to invite you back in a year's time for the September 21 session to hear a review on implementation. So there's a lot of work gone into the preparation of this. I think we are actually be wanting to understand how well has it been implemented and what are the lessons we're learning as we go through it. Tim, Julia, are you okay with that?
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
And let me just check with colleagues. Any hands up to tell me that anybody disagrees? Okay, thank you very much. Finally, moving on to the internal audit plan for 2021. Give me feedback. I probably gave you a heart attack initially.
Thank you, David. Yes. Now, just to update the committee, the full internal audit plan actually came to the January ARAC meeting and was approved then. Obviously, since then, with COVID-19 and the changes that report about. We've met with the senior managers across the CA and had a look at the resources that we've got available for the remainder of the year, where the key risks are within the CA and where best to target the internal audit resource while still giving a strong level of coverage. And rather than bring back the full plan that we did in January, and as discussed with yourself, Dave, because it was getting quite complicated, we've pulled together this short document which hopefully explains where we are. The first part is the revised plan as it now stands and the reviews that are going to be undertaken. There's a couple of new ones in there that weren't in at the time of January but have been added post-COVID. Then at the bottom of the table, we list the audits that were in the original plan but have since been either deferred now to 2021 or 21-22, and where appropriate, we put the reasons against some asterisks to show why some of those have been carried forward. Others are, as I say, resource issues. We have got a slightly higher contingency element to the plan this year because the likelihood is that things are changing fast and we may have to adjust this plan again as the year progresses. Where we do, we'll update the chair on an ongoing basis and then make sure we update our at the next suitable point in time. But really the message is that I guess for the remainder of 2021, the plan needs to remain fluid in order to tackle the challenges now that CA face as we all start to recover from COVID. Happy to answer any questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Can I just check? I've got Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. My comment, as always, with regards to the rear-loading of the internal audit work, stands a standing comment every meeting. I've got one area of slight concern, though, Peter, and that's you've identified the risk management as having a high rating, and yet you're not anticipating bringing that to ARAC until June 2021. Is that not something that could be brought forward?
It's difficult, Sean, because obviously we have to balance the reviews across the year, and a number of the areas are high risk, which is why they're in the plan. So obviously we wouldn't really be able to undertake all those at a certain point in time. But if there is a demand within ARAC for that to come earlier, then we would have to just maybe put back one or two of the other audits. But again, we would have to discuss that with CA managers, because obviously we agree this as to when will be the most suitable time for us to visit and take up the time of CA officers in helping us with those audits. So everything's always up for negotiation, but it needs to be sort of driven by, I guess, ARAC and the CA and ourselves as to the best time when we can fit in and do these reviews, fit in and around the CA and complete them.
I've seen Christine's question, but before I pass to Christine, I just want to raise a point which I think is a natural follow-on from Sean. Peter, and it's probably as much for Tim, I did raise the question at the beginning of the year about the resource. We, in the end, agreed that we would leave the internal audit resource at the same level this year as for the previous year. I would like to hear from Tim and Peter now as to whether or not we should be looking to increase our resource on internal audit. This is, okay, we've had COVID this year, but each year that I've been sitting as chair, we've always ended up pushing things into the following year for a number of reasons. And I think we should start drawing the line and saying this can't continue. And I'd like to hear back either now or proposing in the September meeting an internal audit resource and ensuring that we've enough resource to have the audits done at the speed and the timing that we want. Tim, do you wish to comment, or Peter?
Well, thank you, Chair. And yes, we've talked about this before, and then you've recently raised this again with me, and I have, I think as I said to you a week or so ago, we would be looking at this again. I mean, obviously, when we talk about extra resources, then obviously those resources are going to have to be found from somewhere. Although, you know, obviously this is an important area, so that's not necessarily my final answer on it, because, you know, we must make sure that there are enough resources to do a proper job on internal audit. And obviously the organisation is expanding in terms, I wouldn't say it's expanding per se, but it's expanding in terms of its area of responsibilities. And so I think that has one of the reasons why we've struggled a little bit each year to cover everything, because inevitably during the year other things crop up, other audits or issues come along that our colleagues in Wolverhampton are incredibly flexible in terms of looking at things for us that perhaps weren't in the plan. That does sometimes have a knock-on effect. So I am really conscious of this, and I think Chair, you have asked for us to look at this again, and we will look at it. And I think possibly the first thing is to look at it, come back to you and discuss with you how we might be able to move forward with this, and then agree whether or not we need to bring this back to the committee.
Okay, can I just ask members, colleagues, to show me your hands whether you support my encouragement of increase the resource for internal audit. I know that inevitably there will be a debate on this, but I just want to check whether I'm speaking as one with members or whether I'm. Can I just check how many of you issued the support on that?
Chair, could I just add a comment?
Please.
I understand where you're coming from, and I think that in an ideal world we would love that. I think with some of the explanations we've had where the audit team are overloaded with things not in the plan, I would say this obviously because I'm from Wolverhampton, but I'm not saying it because of that. I realise that the work of the audit team has got to be flexible because of the nature of the combined authorities, basically. So in supporting it, I think there needs to be some period of time where Peter and Tim can work on this one and bring us back a plan that will work in the future. But it depends on resources as ever. But yes, I obviously support your idea long term, definitely. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. It looks like I've got a number of you saying yes. So, Tim, let's leave it that between now and the September meeting, you and I have had a discussion as to what you propose, and that we will then update the ARAC at September as to how we're going to resource it such that we don't find ourselves on an annual slippage cycle.
Yep, that's fine, Chair. Yep.
Thank you. Christine, I bypassed you for a moment. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I've been quiet. This is my first meeting. I've read all the reports. I've got one or two questions, but I've got to say, Chair, the excellent presentations have answered the questions I've got. So I'd like to congratulate the people involved, and I look forward to next meeting. Now I know a bit more about what the committee is about.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any question you want to raise at this point? Right. Then, with the caveat around the discussion and the proposal coming from Tim and Peter regarding the audit resourcing, I take it that we've approved the internal audit plan 2021 as amended. Okay, and we have agreed earlier that in future the chair of ARAC will be consulted before there are changes as opposed to being told after. I think if we can't involve ARAC as a whole, then the chair, whoever that is, should at least be given the opportunity to comment. All right.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. I meant to utter the words that the press and the public should go in accordance with section 100A bracket 4 of the Local Government Act. Tanya, can you just alert me, have we got anybody that I need to invite?